Government Amendment Bill 2023. This council now becomes a committee of the whole council to consider the Road Tunnels Government Amendment Bill 2023. Members may refer to the appendix to the script for the debate and voting arrangements for the bill. Members have been informed that the committee will conduct a joint debate on the clauses and amendments. I now propose the question to you, that is, that the following clauses stand part of the bill. Clauses 1 to 32. Mr. Frankie YICK will move two groups of amendments to amend clauses 20, bracket 4 and 20, bracket 9. Members may refer to the appendix to the script for details of the amendments. Members may now proceed to a joint debate on the clauses and the amendments. I will first call upon Mr. Frankie YICK to speak, but he is not required to move the amendments at this stage. Then I will call upon other members to speak. Upon the conclusion of the joint debate, the committee will first vote on the clauses with no amendment standing part of the bill. Then, Mr. Frankie YICK's two groups of amendments will be dealt with in accordance with the arrangements set out in the appendix to the script. Mr. Frankie YICK. Mr. Deputy, when I spoke for the resumption of second reading of the bill, I already made it clear that the Liberal Party supports the government's proposal of introducing uniform all-day toll for commercial vehicles and taxis. But my proposed amendments relate to lowering the uniform toll of $50 to $20. This does not in any way affect the objective of introducing all-day fixed toll for commercial vehicles and taxis. But because of the President's ruling, I may now move an amendment to the tolls of WHC and CHT. This is not a full package, but in light of the request from my sector, I will continue with this amendment. Perhaps I should explain why I'm moving the amendments. For off-peak hours under the time-varying toll arrangements, private car will be charged a lower toll than the toll for taxis. This will incentivize commuters to use illegal hire vehicles instead. That is why we should align the tolls so that both taxis and private cars will be charged $20 during off-peak hours. Well, when the administration first explained the concept of congestion charging, the government explained that the efficiency first principle will be adopted. That is, vehicles with higher passenger capacity will be able to enjoy a lower toll. And yet, in the end of the day, regardless of the vehicle categories or classes, the same level of tolls are charged. Now, according to the sector's views, if uniform toll of $25 for taxis is charged, then for public light buses is charged $20, and for buses or non-franchise buses, the tolls are even lower. In order to avoid making things too complicated, the sector in the end agreed to the uniform toll proposal of $20. At the Bills Committee meeting, I pointed out that the all-day fixed toll of $50 will increase the operating costs of school coaches and PLBs, and this may pose operating difficulties to the trade. So after explaining my rationale, let me talk about the benefits. We talk about rationalizing cross-harbor traffic in terms of the function of each C. Not many commercial vehicles will use CHT or WHC, especially in times of high fuel costs. For WHC and CHT, because of their proximity in location, toll adjustments should be put in place to redistribute traffic. I am of the view that my proposed amendments, which entails the same toll levels for both tunnels, will not affect the government's estimated traffic flow. This will not induce additional traffic flow either. And my amendments will bring the following benefits. For CHT and WHC, the estimated traffic flow will not undergo substantial changes because of the across-the-board toll levels. This will also help enhance the competitiveness of the logistics industry. Now, for school buses, the level of increase will come down from a 4-fold to a 2-fold increase. They are used to using CHT, and the cost will not be transferred to students and parents. The fourth benefit is that the trade can continue to serve the public. I think that my proposed amendments will provide a win-win solution that will have the support of the public. I so submit. Mr. Chan Xiu-Hong. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Just now, when I spoke for the resumption of second reading of the bill, I already mentioned that I would support the amendment bill, and I support the government's efficiency first principle to encourage members of the public to use public transportation. But there are inconsistencies in this proposal. For example, for five-seater taxis should be charged a higher toll because of its lower efficiency. For PLBs with a seating capacity of 16 to 19, however, they're charged $50 instead. Now, let me turn to Mr. Frankie YICK's proposed amendments. He seeks to lower the uniform toll for commercial vehicles from the $25 and $50 respectively for taxis and commercial vehicles to $20 across the board. According to the government, this is not to drive up government revenue, but to redistribute traffic across the tunnels to ease traffic congestion. But when it comes to his amendments, according to Rules of Procedure 57(6), for amendments with a charging effect, this will entail a government's loss of revenue which can be collected under statutory authority. And as such, the consent in writing of the chief executive will be required for the amendment to be moved. But I think it really hinges on the government's estimated revenue. Taking the budget already passed by the Council this year as the basis, there is also this presumption whether the government will be charging $50 for all commercial vehicles using WHC after the 2nd of August. And then if the toll levels are lowered from $50 to $20, this will indeed cause a loss in the public coffers or the revenue foregone. According to the President's ruling, for WHC and CHT, the amendments will not cause a charging effect because the government will not lose toll revenue. However, according to the according to the President's ruling, for taxis, there will be a $110 million of revenue foregone, and as such, the consent in writing from the CE will be required to move this amendment. I don't share the view of the President. Be it the government's amendment bill or the proposed amendments, the three tunnels should be considered as a whole package. If you single out any one of them, you will not be able to achieve the effect of rationalizing traffic. So this leaves more to be desired. Upon the President's ruling, Mr. Yick will only be able to move amendments on CHT and WHC. And if the amendments are passed, I am worried that there will be serious traffic congestion at the CHT and WHC. For commercial and taxi drivers, they'll be charged $50 or $25 at the EHC, whereas for CHT and WHC, they'll be charged $20 for using them. So in the past few days, the administration showed the greatest sincerity in lobbying our support and citing data to convince us. According to the administration, if the proposed amendments are passed, this will cause additional traffic flow of 350 at the CHT and WHC during peak hours. This will cause an additional tailback all the way to 2.9 and 2.2 kilometers respectively. This means non-cross-harbor traffic will also be affected by the serious congestion, and at the end of the day, the public will suffer. I'm not going to support this incomplete package of amendments. Although Mr. Frankie YICK's original intention is to help lower the operating cost of commercial vehicles, I must say that I only support the government's bill.
Mr. Tony Jie. Mr. Deputy, the Road Tunnels Government Amendment Bill 2023, which has just received its second reading, seeks to rationalize the toll level for free tunnels during peak hours, and also to implement the time-varying toll model, so that some vehicles, especially private cars, can be diverted to non-peak hours. This will alleviate the cross-harbor congestion problem. For commercial vehicles like taxis and goods vehicles, time-varying toll may lead to disputes with customers. As a result, under the bill for CVs, at any time slots, there will be an across-the-board all-day charge. For taxis, it is $25. For other CVs, $50. Now, the taxi industry will accept the proposal. Now, at present, every trip at CHT is only $20. Now, for the WHC, it is $55. Now, most taxi drivers would choose the WHC because there is less congestion and the time saved may lead to another trip. Now, with the rationalization of toll fee, I hope there will be more customers choosing the WHC according to their destinations, and in turn alleviating the congestion at the CHT. Now, for other commercial vehicles like goods vehicles and buses, the response is mixed. Now, for CHT, it's more expensive. For WHC, it's less expensive. For EHC, either more expensive or less expensive, depending on your type of vehicle. Now, the amendments, the original amendments from Mr. Frankie YICK suggested that all CVs other than taxis should be charged at the price of $50. I believe the trade would support the proposal because no one would like to pay more. But I doubt whether this is a reasonable suggestion, especially at peak hours. All three tunnels are congested. For private cars, they will be charged at $30 or even more, $30 or even more. Now, we can't just charge CVs $25. However, the government's proposal of $50 per trip, or whether it is the most efficient proposal, I think we have to wait and see. Now, Mr. Frankie YICK's amendments involve the restrictions on members' bill under Basic Law Article 74. As a result, the current amendments only involve toll for the WHC and the CHT. If it is passed, CV's toll at each C would be higher than the other two tunnels, diverting some CVs to CHT and cause additional congestion. It defeats the purpose of the amendment bill and even the original amendments to be moved by Mr. Frankie YICK himself. So the G19 and myself will not support the CSA to be moved by Mr. Frankie YICK. I so submit I object to the CSA. Mr. Chow Xiu Chong. Mr. Deputy, I support the CSAs to be moved by Mr. Frankie YICK. Now, the government proposed that all CVs except taxis will be charged at $50 across the board. It is virtually increasing the toll at CHT for a lot of CVs. Now, the trade is very unhappy. A lot of logistics stakeholders, especially individual operators, are very aggrieved by this. It will add to their financial cost and worsen their operating environments. In fact, if we adopt an across-the-board toll for all three tunnels, whether it be $50 or $25, we can have the same effect of diversion of traffic. Now, a higher or more expensive toll may not lead to a reduction in traffic demand. So the across the board $50 charge would lead to a minor increase in revenue. However, it would add to the cost of the transport sector. Now, Mr. Frankie Yick's amendments are supported by me. Now, however, after the President's ruling, his amendments can only will only involve CHT and WHC. Now, the final product would be unacceptable by the trade. Now, the toll difference between CHT and the EHC is on par with that to be proposed by Mr. Frankie Yick. So even if the toll suggested in the CSA is implemented, I don't think there will be any additional traffic generated. Now, we have voiced our concerns and worries to the government, but the government did not take on board our suggestions. Now, commercial vehicles are different with private cars. The demand for tunnel service is inelastic. Now, in last June, in the paper submitted by the administration to the panel on transport, the government said that congestion charging should focus on private cars using cross-harbour tunnels so as to free up resources for other vehicles. Now, CVs are important for our economic activities, and there are fewer alternatives for them. Now, we should review the toll level for CVs, which is higher than private cars. In other words, the tunnel toll is too high for CVs. It should be brought down. I think the public and the transport trade don't understand why the government is proposing this toll scheme, which defeats the original purpose. It is in effect increasing the toll fee for a lot of CVs. Now, we understand that we should charge lower toll for vehicles with lower carrying capacity. However, public light buses has a much higher carrying capacity than taxis. Why do they have to pay a higher toll? Now, we have the operating environments as it is already very bad for PLBs. Now, with the higher toll, PLBs will have to charge a higher fee, and it will reduce their living space further. Now, there is I think a $20 across the board fee for WHC and CHT would be fairer. Now, if the amendments are passed, the government should address the present issue, that is, EHC's toll fee for CVs is higher than the other two tunnels. The government should review the existing practice. Now, I hope the government would understand the plight of commercial vehicle drivers and provide more support to the trade with other policy tools. Now, they have just emerged from 3 years of epidemic. To add to their burden further by raising the toll, it is unfair for them. I so submit. Mr. Michael Look. Mr. Deputy, I speak on behalf of the FTU concerning the CSAs moved by the government, and Mr. Frankie Yick, I will give a consolidated response. Now, the CSAs seek to implement the philosophy of efficiency first and public transport first, meanwhile alleviating the burden on other tunnel users, especially for commercial vehicle drivers who are operating individually. Now, they are the most sensitive drivers to changes in toll. Now, the original CSAs moved by Mr. Frankie Yick proposed to charge all CVs besides taxis at a level of $20. that would be perfect. Now, no matter how low the toll is for CVs, it would be very unlikely for CVs to abuse the tunnel. No CV drivers would simply drive around aimlessly. That's common knowledge. However, it is a shame that in accordance with the rules of procedure, 57(6), the President, Mr. Andrew Leung, ruled that Mr. Frankie Yick's amendments on Clause 20(7) about HC may lead to a reduction in revenue collected by the government, and the amendments would have to be paid for with public money. As a result, there is a charging effect, and that amendment was not allowed. Now, the final product of the CSAs would undermine the integrity of the policy intent, which is across the board toll for all CVs of all tunnels. That is something that we have been calling for all along. This will allow more flexibility for the trade in choosing which tunnel to use. The decision can be based on the distance solely. It would be beneficial for the environment as well. Now, Mr. Frankie Yick's intention is good. It can save money for the trade. However, it would defeat the policy intent of the bill. So, reluctantly, we have to abstain from this vote. And also, the government has not taken on board our suggestion to lower tunnel toll for CVs. We find this regrettable, especially for public light buses and school buses. They are especially sensitive to changes in toll. Now, the operating environment for PLBs is difficult. Now, the additional $35 in toll would have to be transferred to passengers. That is at $2 per passenger. PLBs don't have a lot of customers as is. And also, school buses will have to transfer the additional cost to parents. Now, it would exacerbate the plights faced by the trade. Now, after the passage of the bill, I hope the government would keep monitoring the difficulties faced by the industry. If what we have been worrying is true, we hope there can be more support for the trade. Say, for example, establish a fund with the additional revenue to support the industry. So I hope the government will listen to the trade. Thank you. I shall submit. Mr. Ben Chen. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Now, the key of the bill is to standardize the toll for all CVs to discourage detouring and distribute cross-harbor traffic more evenly. Now, back in the Bills Committee, we all welcome Mr. Frankie Yick's idea. However, after the President's ruling, if the CSAs moved by Mr. Frankie Yick after Mr. President's ruling is passed, it would defeat the original purpose of the bill. That is to impose an across-the-board $50 toll for all CVs. Now we have asked whether we can lower the toll for CVs in the evening even more, from $50 to $20, to encourage some operators to switch to operation in the evening to further lower the cost for them. Now, Mr. Frankie Yick said just now those people living in Trengganu and Kwun Tong would not take a detour because of the $50 charge. That's true. if you live in Tranquillo and Guntong, they will never take a detour to use the WHC. However, we have to look at the bigger picture over the territory. Now, for a driver in Tai Po and Sha Tin, when they want to come to Hong Kong Island, they will have to choose between the Tate Cairns tunnel or the other tunnel. Now, if the EHC is cheaper, they may choose the Tate Cairns tunnel and then the EHC at Kwun Tong. If WHC is cheaper, they may choose the other tunnel. So citizens may not choose to detour because of the lower toll, because of fuel cost. However, for people living further away, where they can choose which tunnel to use, toll, they may be more sensitive to toll. Now, if EHC is charging a price of $50 while the other two at $25, it may lead to congestion at CHT and the WHC. So people living in Kowloon East in Kwun Tong may not choose a detour, but people living further away may do so. Now, because of the ruling, we cannot support the CSA as is. Now, I applaud Mr. Frankie YICK for stating his views for the trade in the Bills Committee. We have kept an open mind to his proposals. However, we are worried that if the CSAs after the ruling is passed, it may cause more problems. Now, I hope the government would review the situation after gathering more statistics, especially for school buses. They are facing a lot of pressure in their operation. Now, with the declining number of students and birth rates, the operating environment is very harsh, so the government should help them where it can. Of course, we need more statistics. Thank you, I so submit.
Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I now call upon the Secretary for Transport and Logistics to speak. After that, I will call upon Honourable Frankie YICK, mover of the amendments, to speak again. Then the debate will come to a close. Secretary. Mr. Deputy, Mr. Frankie YICK's proposed amendment seeks to amend the toll levels of commercial vehicles and taxis for the 3 harbour crossing tunnels to lower them to $20 instead of $50 and $25 as proposed by the government. Whether it is on the basis of policy or the considerable adverse impact to traffic, the government does not agree with Mr. YICK's amendments. I'd like to state, first of all, that the government's policy objective is crystal clear. It aims to formulate a practicable proposal as soon as possible in order to rationalize traffic flow of the 3 harbour crossing tunnels to alleviate tunnel traffic congestion. The government's toll proposal is a balanced and well thought out proposal. A uniform fixed rate for the 3 tunnels provides certainty of toll cost for the trade. This is favorable to the operation of the business and to the protection of employees. The uniform charge of $50 for commercial vehicles under the government proposal is reasonable. We have applied the efficiency first principle to reduce the toll fees for commercial vehicles that are more efficient. The toll fees for commercial vehicles that is currently on the high side is reduced to a lower level similar to that of private cars at peak hours and to lower the toll level of Western Tunnel significantly. The toll level for large commercial vehicles is reduced. The government has the proposed fees for taxis is also lowered for the Western Tunnel. For light goods vehicles and taxis is similar to the current level. And there is a reduction of about 41% as well. In terms of taxis, the government has actively responded to the request of the taxi trade to take into account the operational needs by proposing a uniform rate of $25. The level is lower than the proposed toll for private cars in the first phase under the 633 fixed toll plan. The government does not agree with Mr. Yick's amendment for the following reasons. First, the amendment creates a considerable adverse impact on cross-harbor and non-cross-harbor traffic. Should the amendment be passed, the toll fees of the Eastern Tunnel of commercial vehicles, $50, will double those of the Cross-Harbor Tunnel and the Western Tunnel, which is $20. The toll fee for the Western Tunnel will be distinctly lower than the existing average fees of the three tunnels, which will attract additional traffic. It is foreseen that a large number of commercial vehicles will switch to the Cross-Harbor Tunnel and the Western Tunnel. This is particularly the case for light goods vehicles, which account for 14% of peak cross-harbor traffic. Congestions at these tunnels will worsen. The traffic queues of the Cross-Harbor Tunnel and the Western Tunnel can reach 2.9 kilometers to Prosperous Garden and 2.6 kilometers to Nanchang Park. And the queues, and this will block critical junctions of connecting roads such as Kings Park, Sports Ground, Fat Kwong Street, Playground, and other places, tailing back from the tunnels. Non-cross-harbor traffic in Hong Kong, and Jordan, and other areas will be seriously affected. And this offsets the effectiveness of the government's proposal to reduce traffic flow of private cars during peak period. Private car drivers, passengers of public transport to cross the harbor will suffer from congestion. And it is also unfair to private car drivers who pay more for less traffic. And the drawback of the amendment outweighs the gain. And it means the work put in by the government, LegCo, and society to come up with a proposal will go to waste. On the other hand, the government's proposal helps to alleviate tunnel traffic congestion. The queues at Cross-Harbor Tunnel and Eastern Tunnel can be shortened by 1 to 1.5 kilometers and 0.5 kilometers. Moreover, the amendment will render the toll fees for commercial vehicles and taxis of the three tunnels different. And this runs counter to the uniform rates supported by the transportation sector and the LegCo. Commercial vehicles may incur higher fuel costs from having to detour to a tunnel with a lower fee. This will cause pollution. There may be views that the amendment lowers toll fees for commercial vehicles, which favors the trade. However, the fees for most commercial vehicles of the Cross-Harbor Tunnel have not been adjusted for close to 40 years. The toll level may be of little reference value. We also need to consider traffic situation and efficiency of the operation of the fleet of the trade. In our consultation with the trade, we learned from professional drivers that sitting in traffic for a lower toll fee is not necessarily a good thing, as it actually harms the interest of the trade. The aim of the government's proposal is to regulate traffic. It's not to increase revenue. But still, we don't want to see toll revenue being affected by the amendment. Taking into account possible increase of traffic flow in some areas, we estimate the toll revenue will drop by about $500 million a year. We've explained to the Bills Committee during the scrutiny that we will monitor cross-harbor traffic and adjust toll levels for commercial vehicles. If necessary, we will amend the subsidiary legislation to adjust the toll fees. And at the same time, we will consider the existing definition of light goods vehicles and maybe change it to for a better effect. We've opposed to Mr. Yick's amendment. Mr. Frankie Yick, would you like to speak? When I speak in the committee stage, I said that the Liberal Party supports the spirit of the government's proposal, that is a uniform rate for commercial vehicles. My original amendment is the same, but because of the President's ruling, my amendment is crippled. There may be a slight adverse impact, but I don't agree with what the Secretary said. It's not a considerable adverse impact. I echo Mr. Ben Chan's point. People traveling from the new territories might be slightly affected. I've heard from 30 members, but it looks like that my amendment will be vetoed. Still, I ask members to reconsider. It doesn't matter that my amendments are not endorsed. The Secretary actually has said that in the second phase, they will closely monitor the traffic situation. If there is room, I hope that the government will take the initiative to lower the uniform fees for commercial vehicles so that we can have a higher competitiveness, and this will also benefit Hong Kong people. We'll now vote on the clauses with no amendments standing part of the bill. I put the question to you that the clauses with no amendment are set out in the appendix to the script stand part of the bill. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of members present. I declare the motion passed. We now vote on the amendment. Honourable Frankie Yick will please move your first group of amendments concerning the Cross Harbour Tunnel tolls. Chairman, I move my first group of amendments as set out in the appendix to the script. I propose the question to you that Mr. Yick's first group of amendments be passed. Will those in favour please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is not agreed by majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment negatived. Mr. Frankie Yick, please move your second group of amendments concerning the Western Harbour Tunnel tolls. Chairman, I move my second group of amendments as set out in the appendix to the script. I propose the question to you that Mr. Yick's second group of amendments be passed. Will those in favour please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is not agreed by majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the amendment negatived. I now put the question to you that Clause 20 stand part of the bill. Will those in favour please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by majority of the members present and declare the motion passed. All the proceedings on the Road Tunnels Government Amendment Bill 2023 have been concluded in Committee of the Whole Council. Council now resumes. Secretary for Transport and Logistics. President, I now report to the Council that the Road Tunnels Government Amendment Bill 2023 has been passed by Committee of the Whole Council without amendment. I move the motion that this Council adopts the report. I now propose the question to you that the Secretary's motion be passed. Will those in favour please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of members present. I declare the motion passed. Third reading. Road Tunnels Government Amendment Bill 2023.